Are you troubled by pop culture references you don't understand?
Does trying to figure out a good jumping on point in a long-running comic series keep you up at night?
Have you or your friends or family seen a comic book-based movie, TV show, or cartoon and not known what was going on?
If the answer is yes, then this is the podcast for you.
My Big Fat Pull List. Our assembly of knowledgeable hosts are eager to help answer all your comic book-based pop culture questions. We're ready to geek out with you!
Hey guys and gals, Smurphy here with my two favorite associates.
Who are they?
I think he's talking about us.
I was going to say, it's just us here.
He's talking to you.
Formerly my two favorite associates.
Formerly, yes, exactly.
Not anymore.
Yes, Mr. X.
And Pistol. Danger.
And we're here to talk about on my Big Fat Pull List.
G.I. Joe, the real American hero, during the pull list's most wanted.
These are heroes that don't have capes, but have cool names.
Was there ever a luchador Joe? Because he might have had a cape.
No capes.
No
There were
capes.
wrestler
All right.
No capes.
Joes.
No capes.
But no
cool
lucha
outfits. A lot of camo
Very
and a lot of
cool.
green.
Yeah,
but cool
a lot of
outfits.
green.
And a lot of cool vehicles.
A bit about how it all began.
The first original G.I. Joe was started to be written in 1942. And it was under government. It's GI stood for Government Issue Joe.
Right.
And it was a guy in the military who, during his, either when he was off work or, he worked in the motor vehicle department, he'd go to the bakery and draw. And he drew it for a newspaper, the New York Post. And eventually, the military found out, and they're like, hey, you have skills as an artist. We want you pretty much to make motivational pamphlets, and kind of bring the military to a good light. So he would draw G.I. Joe.
It was propaganda
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, and it was just the one guy, and they even made a toy line of it, like the 12-inch figure that you could get as an astronaut figure. It's on Seinfeld, where he has, the frog man. It's all the same kind of guy.
Please never reference Seinfeld on our comic book.
Well, it's there. I'm just letting you know. So his his illustrations were only in the Sunday paper or a magazine called G.I. Joe, like an actual magazine, big magazine.
Yeah.
That's why Hasbro relaunched it in 1982, and they're like, we're going to do it a little different. We're going to have six-inch figures and a comic to go along with it.
Yeah.
I feel educated. Educate me more.
You got it. So Hasbro had this great idea where they're like, we're going to hit the fans with from three different angles. They're going to do a comic, a cartoon, and a toy line all at once.
All at once.
All at once.
Very
And
ambitious.
The way they did it, too, was if you're watching the cartoon, you saw commercials for the toys.
Okay.
If you bought the toys, on the back of every toy was a file which gave you more information about your Joe.
Wow.
You want to read more about it, where do you turn? The comic book.
Got to go to the comic book.
You're reading the comic book, and what's the ads in there for? The cartoon
and the toy line. Yeah.
There you go.
All
Right?
And at the time, that was social media. You people can't see it
Yeah.
at home, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
did the finger quotes.
Right.
That's how they did it. And I remember keeping a lot of those. I wasn't a big G.I. Joe guy, but I liked the toys, and I liked having the little files.
Yeah.
Right. Well, as a kid, you're watching a cartoon, I want to know more. Go to the comic book store, you're like, oh, I know G.I. Joe. That's a thing I'm familiar with.
Well,
And
it
you
was
start
very
buying them.
popular for the 80s for
yeah.
a toy line to have, even a mini comic book associated.
Right.
I remember He-Man had mini comics in every character. In every toy you bought, there was a little mini comic book that kind of told a little story about the character that you bought. It seemed like an 80s trend to put as much information as you can so that there was more imagination to your plane.
Transformers is the same thing. Also has
Transformers?
right?
Yeah,
And that's
okay.
why you'd see on the back of the Transformers figures would tell you their powers and defense looked very similar to the G.I. Joe line, on the back of those toys. So
It's almost like they were in the same universe at some point.
The 80s.
yeah, and like I said, this line ran from 1982 to 1994.
Wow.
Yeah.
Over a decade of
Now
destruction.
that's again cartoon, comic, and everything else. The comic is actually still going on today, and is going through 4 different publishers. So what's your favorite iteration of G.I. Joe? Was it the comics? Was it the toy line? Or was it the cartoon? Reach out to us at mybigfatpolllist.com.
Go Joe. Go Marvel.
So how long did the first iteration
comic
of the comic book through Marvel last?
155 issues.
155 issues.
From 82 to 94.
That's a nice that's a nice run. Okay.
And it just had your basic variety of Joes, 12, 13 guys. Most of them all look the same. So all of them in the comic, you're reading through it, all wore military green.
Okay.
A lot of them, the only thing that really kept them apart was a few guys would have an armored chest that was like silver. One was red. Hawk wore a leather jacket, but like Scarlet and Snake Eyes really stood out because we all know Snake Eyes was the commando with the visor you couldn't see, and Scarlet wore her basic tan leotard with like tights. So,
and she was the only redhead,
only girl,
and the only girl at the time.
Yep,
because this is before what? But Baroness.
Yeah. Before all pretty much all that.
Because we always had. It seems like in the '80s specifically, if I'm remembering correctly, it seemed that we always had one female hero character, and then there was always that counterpart. There was always at least one evil female character.
Baroness would be the balance.
Yeah.
Baroness, super evil, black hair, glasses, right. But yeah, she came out a little bit later. So most of the Joes were just fighting Cobra and or evil bad guys, if you will. Like they didn't
generic style.
Yeah, like the generic bad guy. And Snake Eyes at one point before he really started fighting Storm Shadow, which everyone's familiar with, he was actually going toe to toe with an Eskimo.
Oh,
yeah.
What was the Eskimo's name? Do you know?
I do not.
Eskimo Joe.
I swear it was pretty close to Eskimo Joe. They just normally called him the Eskimo.
Eskimo John.
Yeah.
No, they called him Eskimo Kisses.
And then for a while, since it was the 80s, Cold War time, they fought the October Guard, which was Russia's counterpart to G.I. Joe.
Okay. All right.
But they only lasted, I feel like, for the first 10 issues or so, and then it switched over to Cobra and all his terrorist organization in the United States.
A terrorist organization that seemed to just wanted world domination, that didn't seem to have any kind of connection to any other country.
No, it was just the United States.
They loved everybody because if I'm remembering the comic book and the toy line correctly, they welcomed all walks of life.
If you want to be a bad guy,
as long as you were bad,
you're in.
You could be a part of
which
Cobra.
is where Destro joined. Because Destro wasn't originally in the first few issues. He came in later on. He had his whole other group of team. That's almost a whole other podcast. So he had his Iron Grenaders, and you start getting crazy. But what was crazy about the comic as opposed to the cartoon was that guys like Stalker was their Army Ranger. He was more in the comic, not as much in the cartoon. Doc was another one you saw a lot in the comic and not in the cartoon.
Well, that's kind of nice, though, for the toys.
Oh, yeah.
You have different ways to find out about these characters. If you like Doc and he's not in the cartoon, well, Doc is in the comic now.
Right.
So now you have that, and that's smart. It's
incentive to
good
try to get
business.
a part of everything. Yeah.
Right. And at first, the only part that was confusing as a kid, you're reading the comic and you're like, all these guys they look military. They're all wearing their military green uniforms. But nothing stood out. So you're like, a guy would get shot. And in the comic, they used bullets. It wasn't lasers. There was a group of guys that did use lasers. Most of them used the real life guns. They were M16s. They were Browning 50 cals, real life missiles. So when a guy got shot, you would see the bullet hit him. They wouldn't do blood, but the guy would go down. He'd be hurt for a while. They have to bandage him up.
See, that's what I was going to ask.
Didn't.
I wanted to know whether or not the comic book in the early days, did the comic book try to up the violence because it was a comic book, or were we still trying to sell to kids?
It was more your military comes with violence.
Right.
So they'd be chasing a Cobra. He'd turn around with a pistol, shoot a guy. It hit him in the knee and the elbow. He'd be down. So now another Joe would have to run over, bandage him up, while the rest of them are we're going to go after the bad guy.
No, okay.
So yeah, so it's, fairly violent, and many a times.
It's not like Saving Private Ryan violent.
No,
but
not that
violent.
But
for early '80s comic books. Yeah.
There's an issue where Snake Eyes is fighting an Eskimo guy, and a bomb's coming in, and Snake Eyes jumps, grabs the guy. They fall into a bunker, and it explodes. And you don't, and all of a sudden,
you don't know what happened.
Yeah, you're like, what happened?
It says to be continued.
Yeah.
Pick up the next issue.
Not even to be continued. It's just Snake Eyes get hit with a bomb. Good luck.
Oh no.
Yeah, next issue you're reading, they don't talk about Snake Eyes, but at the very end of the book, also you see the bunker and you see little air bubbles coming out of it.
Oh.
And you're like, somebody's in there breathing. Right. But you're the whole time you're like, Snake Eyes is dead. Devastating. My favorite guy dead. But
I was a big Eskimo John fan, but all
right. But again, they would normally live. However, they did. So the story goes, fans were into Marvel. You have too many Joes because every year they'd pump out more and more Joes, right? And they're all Navy SEALs, jets, fighter pilots, helicopter pilots, you name it. They're like, you have too many characters. We don't like it. You need to kill some off. We're tired of the same old characters. So Marvel was like, okay. So in issue 109, they did the unthinkable, and they had a Cobra Viper, right? Who all the Cobra guys had snake names.
Right. Well, yeah, of course.
Snapped. Turned, and there's a picture of Doc, their medic, who looks up from behind a trench and just goes, "I think our time is up." And the guy goes, "You're right," and he shoots 3 of the Joes, and they die. They die right there.
108 episodes, everybody walks away fine, but all of a sudden, just 109, time to start a body count.
And after that happens, Quick Kick.
Everybody knows Quick Kick,
our residential stuntman,
most popular Joe,
who was a stuntman from California who decided to join the Joe team. He snaps. grabs the guy's gun and shoots the Cobra guys and kills them.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, and
He deserves it.
Yeah,
Revenge.
never come back. And again,
Yo, Joe.
from comics, oh, bad guys are dead, or good guys are dead. They'll be back. No, these guys are dead.
What?
They're not in the TV show. And they're gone. That's it.
So these characters weren't a part of the TV series?
No, Doc was not a part of the TV series.
Because I remember
Doc,
the TV series, nobody died.
Right, and Doc was replaced by the medic Lifeline. And Lifeline was a guy who wore all red and white, and like in the comic, they're like, he really believes in not using weapons, so he knew jiu-jitsu, and he would just beat the crap out of every Cobra he came across. Right, because fans had a huge outcry, like, how could you kill my favorite character? What's wrong with you? And
Well,
they're like, we did what you
that's a
said.
contradiction right there. The fans were all like, hey,
Yep.
nobody dies in this book.
And then they're like, we kill the guys, and they're like, oh my god, no, can't
This
do
is
it.
why fans are the worst.
Yeah,
Except for our fans.
Except for our
our
fans.
fans, are the best. And that's right.
Jinx, you both owe me a Coke.
Because they hate the same things we hate, and they love the same things we love.
Yeah.
And if they don't, we agree to disagree.
Yes.
Yeah. The other two guys that died besides Doc, I forgot to mention their names, are Crankcase and Heavy Metal. Yeah.
I actually do know heavy metal.
Yeah. Heavy Metal was a machine gunner.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was.
most of the guys' names were based off of whatever they did, to an extent. Like, there was a guy named Zap, where he
Okay.
was like their laser
So tell me,
soldier. Yeah.
what did Crankcase do?
They just got caught. They were literally caught, and they were being
No,
held
he
prisoner
meant,
by
like,
Cobra.
what was his
oh,
job?
Crankcase?
Yeah,
I would
got
assume
you. My bad.
mechanic
If
of
he's
some kind.
named, if he's named after what
Yeah.
he does,
My bad. Hang
would
on.
assume
It's
mechanic.
right here.
I'm going to bet money mechanic.
Crankcase. Well, sorry, I have the original Joe's listed right here.
hi,
and
I'm
Crankcase on
Toilet
there.
Snake.
Yeah. Well,
What do I do?
For example, yeah. I don't have Crankcases written down. He's just a soldier, as far as I know. He didn't do anything fancy.
You know what?
After
Here's
a
the
while-
thing. It's a rhetorical question
Right,
because
Still,
because I'm sure Crankcase did something with machinery.
I think he did prank phone calls.
Yes. hey, Cobra, your
Well-
refrigerator on?
Well, for example, like there was a guy called Steeler. What would you think Steeler would do?
Steeler,
Steeler, you ready? He was the tank commander.
the tank commander. That doesn't
So,
make
okay,
sense at all.
So tank commander is the guy who gives the orders for everyone else in the tank. So he's the guy who's like looking out, being like, all right, man, we got to turn right, driver, 90 degrees right, and driver kick 90 degrees right. Hey, get the long, tank barrel ready to fire with a smoke round. The guy would put a smoke round in it. And he'd be like, fire at this degrees, and fires. The tank commander literally gives the commands for everyone else in the tank, so the tank knows where to go and maneuver.
Okay.
So, Crankcase was G.I. Joe's AWE striker driver,
There you go.
and he debuted in 1985.
Yeah, see? It's
Thank
like I said.
you,
Thank
mental
Wikipedia.
prowess.
Sorry.
Mental prowess, my ass.
I went to my mind
'Cause
temple or whatever.
I got the original Joe
say
lineup. Then after that, every year they came out with about 10 other guys. Like they came out with Wetsuit. Guess what Wetsuit did?
Ooh, he was a scuba diver.
Boom!
I was
Ooh,
going to
I'm
say
getting
slip
good
and
at this.
slide
Gold
tester.
star to Mr. X.
Who
So
was
maybe
the
you
one?
should be Mr. G now.
Who was the Joe that had the little sailor hat and the
Shipwreck.
parrot?
Shipwreck. Yeah, they always made
I
out to be
loved
the drunk-
Shipwreck.
Oh, Shipwreck was fantastic.
On the cartoon, but I
Yeah.
never read the comic books. So
In the comic, he was a little more salty. He was also a little more of a BA. He was a little more of a badass in the comics.
Okay.
Yeah, because he
well,
was
I
always
would
in
I would
sailor.
assume
Yeah.
so because if you look at the cartoon, there is your cartoon versions of these characters. You
Right.
keep them kid friendly. In a comic book, you're able to expand
Right.
and give these characters depth.
For example, Bazooka was in the G.I. Joe movie. He was a guy
Yes.
who wore the number 14 red jersey, big old mustache, and
Right.
like the fatigue pants, and fought with a bazooka. And he was a
Surprising.
big dumb idiot in the cartoon, like barely formed sentences, big dumb idiot. But they used him because like he's our muscle, and he'd be like bazooka hit hard. Like he literally almost talked like that.
Oh,
It
Hulk
was bad.
does?
Yeah, like it was bad, right? I know. In the comic, that's not the case. In the comic, they're like, we need stuff blown up. Call him Bazooka. Bazooka comes in, blows it up. End of story.
Me blow up good.
Yeah, but he didn't talk like that. Like these guys were like, wow, these guys are like BAs, like Chuckles.
Right.
Chuckles never talks in the cartoon or the movie. He's one of their like best soldiers, like in the comics, because he's supposed to be like the best of the best the military has to offer.
Yeah.
But so wait, are you telling me that in the comics or in the cartoons, no one died?
Ever.
Even in the movie, they would add an offline to make sure that everyone knew Duke was okay?
You know why they did that, right? That was
Because of
backlash
the-
from Transformers.
That was the backlash of the yes,
Mm-hmm.
more 80s nostalgia, simply because they kill off all the great Transformers in the
they
Transformers.
kill off the
movie.
father figure.
Yes, Optimus Prime is dead. We get it. Get over it.
No,
It's been decades.
Not-
He's fine now.
too soon.
He got better.
Yay.
But the problem is that the G.I. Joe movie was being made at the same
time. Yep.
and they were going to kill off Duke,
Yep.
who is your
the leader.
main character.
He's
Yeah.
your leader underneath Hawk.
He's your leader.
Yep.
He's your main guy. And I remember that they actually had to do an overdub because originally
Yeah.
he was dead.
Yeah,
He
died.
gone. Not
He
coming
died saving
back.
his brother.
That's right.
What a way to
Voiced
go.
by Don Johnson in the
Yeah,
film.
right.
There was an offhanded line. It was a, "Hey guys, just heard from the doc," which I guess it should have been Lifeline.
Yeah.
But just heard from the doc. Duke's gonna be okay.
See, now that's weird in the movie. They call
But
him
we never
Doc.
see
It's
him.
short for Doctor, not
Yes,
actual
Doctor.
Doc, the
Oh,
character.
okay.
Yeah, right. See,
You see, I appreciate that finally in the comic books, you have to make it. You have to give it a little bit of realism.
Well, for this especially, like if you want to talk about guys flying with capes, a giant chicken that knows kung fu, okay, I can suspend disbelief that zombies or whatever or magic can bring people back to life. But this is Murph. How often do they use magic wands or giant
and G.I.
fighting
Joe
swords
only
or-
never.
Oh, okay.
Only never.
Okay.
And those aren't the like. That was the big part where they're like, oh my gosh, Joes are dead. Like we can't believe they killed them. Not the only Joes to die. Like a few of them. One of them was driving a vehicle through like an oil field landmine and boom, dead.
Okay, so what you're
that'll do
saying, because I'm going to have to make a confession here. Back in the 80s, I was not a regular viewer of the cartoon. I'd watch it every now
Right.
and then.
You dabble.
I
Yeah,
dabble.
like most
I
of
was a dabbler of G.I. Joe, and I remember how ridiculously hokey
Oh, it's super
certain
hokey.
things were.
Yeah, like
because there was these Cobra people. So there's magic. There is magic and mysticism going on in the cartoon
Yeah.
series, but there was
Comic-
none of that in the comic.
comic was more real.
Good.
Comic kept it to.
Now I want to kind of go back and read those.
Comic
old
kept it
issues.
to like if you're a Navy SEAL, they're like, we need a Navy SEAL for this mission. That guy's the first guy to go. And then they're like, you pick your team, and you guys are going in. And they're like, well, we need a driver, so let's get the drivers.
I'm
Let's get the
Agent
doc.
Porpoise,
Yeah. Right.
and I'm here to
You know,
join
we
the
need-
Joes.
You know, we always got to take Scarlet, and we always got to take Snake Eyes because they're the two best.
They're utility
Yeah.
players.
Well,
Well,
Snake
then-
Eyes is commando.
then
He can do anything.
Well,
So
right,
he's always
your
in.
bad guys, you kind of have opposites for your bad
Yes.
guys because Snake Eyes had
Storm Shadow.
Storm
After
Shadow
a while, right.
After a while, yeah.
Most of it was at first was they were all people. They didn't get into the robots were in the cartoon. If you remember the bats. The bats were the robots,
Right.
so you could shoot them in the head, blow them up, and for kids,
You could
like,
have
oh, a
some
robot
sort of
died.
destruction, yeah.
Just like Turtles and the Foot Soldiers, right? In the comic, it wasn't that way. They're all people, like legit people, and they gave the people backgrounds. Like they were like, hey, meet like Billy. Billy is a Cobra Viper trooper. He has a family and like a young girl, and that's why he's fighting with Cobra. And then the Joes come through, and he's like, family, we got to go. We're in trouble. And you're like, oh my god. And then you see the guy later on dead, and you're just like, holy crap. Pretty
You should
adult.
have gotten a better job then.
Well,
yeah.
I remember
There's no real job security working for Cobra.
Well,
Yeah, henching is not a full time.
well, this is great. So, in one of the comics, actually, like, here's the city they're in. They're in Springfield,
Okay.
right?
Missouri?
They don't mention the city or our state. Only Springfield.
Just because every state has a Springfield.
The Joes hear, hey, Cobra's in the vicinity. We gotta go shut them down. They come rolling through with tanks. As they're rolling through with tanks and their military and their convoys, they're looking at all the businesses. The town's empty, and they're like, this is weird. And you have like Serpent Dry Cleaning, Venom Pizza, everything like snake related, and they're like, the Joes are like, this is
Ned
awfully
Flanders.
fishy. You find out it was an entire city that was run by Cobra, which is where they manufacture their weapons and vehicles. And they knew the Joes were coming, so they had to leave. And there's a part where a guy's got like his daughter and his wife gets him in the car, and they're like, what about like Scruffy the dog? And he's like, Scruffy can't go. And he takes him in the backyard, and you see him put a gun to the head, and then you see bang, turn the page, and that's it. Like,
They killed the dog.
Yeah.
The dog
they,
could
like-
clearly go.
yeah, or at least they made you believe it.
Wow.
Shot the dog because we got to go. We're all
Okay.
in trouble.
All
Joes are
right.
coming.
I have a
Cobra's
confession.
definitely on my list.
Yeah.
A confession. I'm glad they killed Joe. He killed his dog. Fuck Cobra
Yeah.
Joe.
Every issue I felt mattered. It wasn't like, oh, same old thing. The cartoon's a little different. So like every episode, like, hey, missiles coming at that $80 billion truck. Everyone get out of the truck. Truck blows up. We're all
there
fine.
was no real continuity
no
in the
right.
cartoon
It
series.
was just like, oh, we're gonna keep fighting. We're
Well,
gonna
there
go
were
through millions of
lessons to be
jets.
learned.
Yeah.
always lessons to be
The
learned.
more you know.
But no, yeah, the comic is completely different. Hey fans, do you have a favorite Joe? Is it maybe Scarlet? Or is it Snake Eyes? How about Lady J? Or is it even Steeler, our favorite tank commander? Reach out to us at mybigfatpolis.com.
New homes for wayward Joes.
Now here's what gets crazy. It went to technically Image Comics in 2001.
So we've got
We have a
no
gap.
Joe stuff.
For 7
You
years.
would have no Joe for 7 years, right? Very sad time for us all. They had a lot of spin-offs during that time where it was like special missions or they'd reprint stuff, but like nothing continuity-wise going on for the main story.
There was no main
main story.
main
right.
comic book being published.
Not
There was no
until-
main Joe, but was there like the adventures of Snake Eyes and Kung Fu Kid?
No, like all that stuff was all contained in the main one. Like they did, like I said, they did have special missions or Tales of G.I. Joe, but they were retelling the stories.
Okay.
And most of those, again, didn't go anywhere past the 90s. Image takes over in 2001, right? With a brand new #1. It's not so much like a retelling of the stories, but it's characters you know and love, different missions.
Did they bring anybody back from the dead? And I don't mean like zombie-like. I mean like
Doc.
They were just like, here's Doc again.
So Doc will never see the light of day again.
Okay, so if they're dead,
They're dead.
they're dead.
Yeah.
Well, see, that was my question. Is I owned several copies of issue 1 of that Image book because it was everywhere. People were giving it to me for free. Have you read this? You got to read this. And I read it, but I for the life of me, I can't tell you anything about it. So I don't know if it was we've started over. This is the Joes in the 21st century, or
it was more Joe's modern time.
Okay.
Because Larry Hama wrote the whole thing from beginning to current. He was always like a guy who either he helped write it, or he at least helped edit it, or he helped research it. So by research,
like a consultant.
Yeah, like a consultant.
Because
like,
it was his baby.
Like, hey, man, the military's using like M4s right now. We should really give the guys all M4s, which is assault rifle. You know, like
you want to make it more modern,
very modern, more realistic. So kids can be like,
yeah,
like not like cartoon where it's like, I've got a laser rifle, it never has to reload. He wanted to be like, no, give him a 6-shooter. It actually has 6 shots. Got to put it in a holster, etc. Can't just like pull it out of your shirt and shoot somebody.
So you were saying
Shuckles.
Image
brought
back
them all
the
back.
Joes back for the 21st century.
Started #1, new stories.
Right.
Didn't really go with continuity of the Marvel stuff, but it was like different stories. You know what I'm saying?
Good,
So it's like,
okay.
okay, so different stories.
Fresh start.
Yeah, fresh start. Some new stuff. What's Crazy Cobra Commander and Destro up to now?
And Serpentor.
And yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, so, yeah.
Was he the G.I. Joe one?
No, Serpentor was definitely Cobra.
Or was he He-Man?
He was that.
He was the guy who flew on the disc and
Yeah,
made snakes out of it.
But, you know,
The
He-Man
Doctor
also did the snake
God
people,
thing.
too.
Dr. Mindbender made him out of the DNA of all the infamous bad guys throughout the history of the world. Genghis Khan.
Not magic.
Hitler, you name it. Put them all
Science.
down. Science, baby. No wands. Dr. Mindbender.
No wands.
Yeah, no wands.
I know there was a voodoo guy. There was a voodoo guy. I know there was a voodoo guy.
So Image only did the run from 1 to 25, and then split to Devil's Duel Publishing, which was actually helping them copyright the Image material.
Okay.
So they broke the company split, but then they continued with 26 under DDP and went for 80 issues, and then that was it. That was a run done.
Oh, okay.
Right. Weird, right? Then IDW picks up in 2010.
Now IDW, that's a great company right there.
And
there's a lot of books that I read from IDW.
And IDW still printed out now. And then the cool part is they were like, we're going to pick it up where Marvel left off at 156, and on Free Comic Book Day they released 155 and a half to be like, hey, here's what's coming. Here's part of the story. We're going to continue on.
Wow,
the continuity.
okay.
So continuity technically still
really
going on.
cool of them, yeah.
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 And like I said, the whole time, everyone's. I'm like, I've been reading it. It's still good. Larry Hama's still on it, helping edit it, and being an advisor and keeping it going. So he even wrote some of the issues.
Well, I know that through the years, and it's probably some of the IDW stuff. There's been a lot of spin-offs. Cobra has had several. I think they had their own book for a period of time back when the bad guys were the cool thing in comic books. Bad guy comic books were a big thing. So, of course, it makes sense that the Cobra would have their own book.
Tons of spin-offs. Tons of, like I said, the special missions. Then there was, they even did crossovers. A lot of Transformers vs. G.I. Joe.
Well,
G.I. Joe versus
IDW has a very interesting shared combined universe with some of their licensed properties. G.I. Joe, Transformers,
Mask.
They
just released it, and what was it? Is it Micronauts or something else?
Micronauts.
It's all part of the same universe almost now.
ROM Space Knights.
That's it. Yeah, they're all like kind of combined.
It's all a combined universe that they all coexisted.
Right.
Now.
They even did a mini series. Not to get too off the topic, where it was G.I. Joe vs. Transformers in World War II, which is very it was very kind of cool concept. So Optimus Prime, instead of being like a semi, was like a Sherman tank. Because that's what the Allies used. And so the Decepticons would be what the Axis used, and the Joes were real-life World War II commandos. And it's like the story of Snake Eyes is crazy, because like he fights, he gets his whole entire squad gets wiped out, he finds out his face is badly cut, he's got to seal that wound, takes gunpowder out of a bullet, puts it on his face, lights a match to it, then he wraps up his face, and that's why he doesn't talk, and that's why you don't see his face anymore. Yeah, like I said, I was reading it, I was like, that is dark. I'm like, but that is really cool.
Wow.
So, yeah.
A personal touch before goodbye.
Something that I'm going to make you talk about, Smurphy, is because I know about this and we've touched upon it a little bit in past episodes, but I know G.I. Joe is something special to you because of your own personal life.
Yeah, ever since I was about 8, I went to go into the military.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't. I found out later on I couldn't. But this is like my love for the military drew me into this because I was like, it hits every branch of our United States military. These guys are awesome. These guys are heroes. First introduction was a cartoon where, like you said, it was hokey. Then you start reading the comic and you're like, oh, this is like what would probably happen if you're kind of in it, or what could possibly happen. Like, they kept it pretty real.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that's what drew me to it, of course, because I was, my love for violence and the fact that I was like, oh, military. I'm like, I'm all for that. So, yeah, it was one of the very first comics I remember getting. In my collection, I own number 2. I actually own, I can't find number 1, but I own from number 2 up to about 60. I'm only missing about 3 issues in between.
Nice run. Nice run.
I'm hoping to get the whole thing. My goal, one day, have them all. Have all 155, switch over to IDW, and keep it going.
Well, once we're rich and famous, this is our job. People will send you stuff.
I hope. Send me a number 1, fans. Thank you.
Personally, I love a good bad guy. Or bad men. Who was your favorite bad guy in G.I. Joe? Was it Destro? Baroness? Storm Shadow? Was it Cobra Commander in his shrill voice? Firm but masculine. Reach out to us at mybigfatpullist.com.
So I have so many memories of G.I. Joe, reading it, playing with the figures, acting out what I would do in those situations, that even now, as an older adult, I still fantasize about what it would be like. And I still turn to the comic to be like, this could have been me. This is awesome. And I know out there we have real-life soldiers doing close to the same stuff. And that's pretty awesome. This is why I always read it, and I'll continue reading it as long as they keep writing it. So this is Smurphy.
This is Mr. X.
Pistol.
Remember, kids, if a guy drives by in a van, says free candy, free massages, don't do it.
And now you know.
Because knowing's half the battle.
Yo, Joe.
Cobra!
That's our show, folks. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to subscribe on the podcast listening app of your choice.
What he means is download and subscribe on every app possible.
Have comments, questions, suggestions for future shows? Reach out to us at our website at mybigfatpullist.com.
You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Until next time, keep your web fluid sticky.
Your batarangs sharp.
Ouch.
And your space guns charged.
That's not a space gun. That's Megatron.
Who's your favorite bad guy in G.I. Joe? Was it Cobra Commander in his shrill voice? Firm but masculine.
That got kind of gay real fast.
Well, yeah, when you interrupted, I knew I had to do it again, so I just...
I love masked men.
And then,
Do you guys like hanging out with twins like I do? Twin men, that is. I'm Pistol Danger.
What's your favorite part of a man's penis?
Right, like, what?
There's the fucking gas.
Where did this episode go?
Oh, my God.